I wasn't supposed to be home that morning. My flight back from Seattle landed nearly 4 hours earlier than expected, and instead of heading straight to the office, I made a detour. I'd picked up flowers, orange tulips, her favorite, and a bag of breakfast pastries from the little French place on Southport we used to go to when things were better between us. I grabbed 2 coffees, one plain black for me, one vanilla oat milk latte for her, extra hot, just how she liked it. It felt good to be doing something thoughtful, you know? Like I was finally remembering how to be the kind of partner I used to be. Work had kept me distracted lately. Travel, stress, deadlines. But I figured this would be a quiet way to say, hey, I still care. I wasn't looking for some grand gesture in return. I just wanted her smile. Her real smile. Not the one she gave when she was on her phone or halfway out the door. By the time I reached our apartment, it was a little after 9 a.m. The sky over Chicago was gray and heavy, threatening rain, and the streets were still damp from whatever storm rolled through overnight. I remember thinking the air smelled like change, the kind of crispness you only notice when something's about to shift. I opened the door, careful with the key, balancing coffee trays in one hand. Stepping inside, I was immediately hit by the warmth of the apartment. The heat was turned up higher than usual. I noticed that right away, but it wasn't the temperature that caught my attention. It was the silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind that says someone's sleeping in or enjoying a slow morning. No, this silence felt like it was holding its breath. I closed the door softly behind me, shoes still on, and took a few steps into the living room. Everything looked normal, mostly. The couch blanket was tossed haphazardly, and one of the throw pillows was on the floor. Not like Emily, who straightened up even before bed. And then I saw it. The jacket, hanging on the coat hook by the door. Black leather. Slightly worn, but not cheap. A man's jacket, no doubt. The shoulders were broad, the sleeves long. It didn't belong to me. I stopped in my tracks. My brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe I'd forgotten I owned something like that. But no, that wasn't possible. I hadn't worn leather since college. I stared at it for a few long seconds. My heart rate quickened, and for a moment, I convinced myself it had to belong to a friend. Maybe one of her coworkers. Or a neighbor. Someone who stopped by. But who stops by in the middle of the night, hangs up their jacket, and forgets it. I took another step, now inside the kitchen. That's when I saw the second thing that didn't belong. A phone. It was lying on the kitchen chair like it had been tossed there carelessly. No case. Black screen. Slightly scuffed along the edges. It wasn't mine. And it wasn't hers either. I'd seen her phone, gold iPhone, always in that pink marble case with the pop socket. This one looked more masculine. Something about it gave me a strange feeling in my gut. That kind of subtle panic that starts as a whisper in the back of your mind. I didn't touch it. I just stood there. The water upstairs was running. Shower, maybe. Pipes creaked faintly above me. I looked up, heart thudding in my chest. She didn't know I was home yet. Emily, I called out, voice louder than I meant it to be. Silence for a beat. Then, Trevor. Her voice sounded casual, light, like nothing was out of the ordinary. You're back already? I heard her footsteps, wet slaps against tile. A minute later, she appeared at the top of the staircase, towel wrapped around her hair, wearing a white robe I hadn't seen in a while. She smiled, descending slowly. I tried to read her face. Was she surprised? Caught off guard? Nervous? No. She looked calm. Oh, she said, eyes flicking to the tulips. You brought flowers. Yeah, I replied. Thought I'd surprise you. She padded into the kitchen, picked up one of the coffees, sniffed it. Vanilla oat milk? She asked with a grin. Yeah. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, then took a long sip from her cup. Perfect. I didn't say anything right away. I glanced again at the jacket. She noticed. Oh, that, she said. That's my brother's. I turned to her. Your brother? Yeah, she said, brushing some wet hair behind her ear. He stayed over last night. Just crashed here on his way back to Indy. I told you he might swing through. I hadn't heard anything about that, but I didn't say so. He left early this morning, she continued, moving past me to grab a glass of water. Like, before 6. I think he had a flight or something. And the phone. She glanced at the chair. Oh, he left that too. Figures. He's always forgetting his stuff. Her tone was so casual, so unfazed. You'd think she was explaining where the cereal went. I nodded slowly. She took a sip of water, then walked over to the tulips, inspecting them. These are nice, she said. We haven't gotten flowers in a while. I smiled faintly. Yeah. And that was it. She didn't offer more. No apology for not telling me he was coming. No weird energy. No frantic attempt to cover something up. And yet, something inside me sank. It's hard to explain. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It wasn't even fear. It was this subtle, aching sense that something had shifted beneath my feet, and I just hadn't realized it yet. I should have pressed her. Should have asked which flight he took, or why he didn't say goodbye, or why she didn't mention he'd be staying overnight in the first place. But I didn't. I just stood there, pretending everything made sense. Pretending that a man's jacket and a strange phone in our apartment didn't send my heart racing. We sat at the kitchen island. She talked about her plans for the day, some Zoom meeting, a marketing call, maybe yoga later. I nodded along, but I wasn't hearing her. I couldn't stop glancing at that phone, at that jacket, at the way she didn't look even slightly rattled. And maybe that's what bothered me the most. I used to know Emily. Every tick, every tell. But that morning, standing in our own kitchen, watching her move around like nothing was off, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit. I didn't recognize the woman I'd married. And worse, she didn't look like she recognized me either. After that morning, something in me shifted. I didn't say anything, not out loud. I didn't accuse, didn't start a fight. But I started watching. And once I started, I couldn't stop. The jacket was gone by the time I got home from work that night. So was the phone. Not a trace left behind. No follow-up from her brother. No text. No thank you. Nothing. I checked our security app. There was no record of him coming or going. The camera in the hallway had been offline, somehow. I don't even know when that started happening. And when I asked her casually about it, Emily said, "Oh yeah, I meant to tell you. It's been glitching lately. I think we need a new router." Right. At first, I told myself not to read too much into it. But then I started noticing the little things. Noticing how long they'd been there. How long I'd been ignoring them. Like how her phone was always face down. Always. Even when we were out at dinner or watching a movie together. If it buzzed, she didn't pick it up unless she could turn away first. It used to lie out in the open, screen lit up with messages from her group chat, notifications from work. But now, silence. And passwords, those changed too. Subtly. First it was the lock screen. Then the laptop. Then her iPad. I'd never had a reason to check before. Never wanted to. But now that I did, I realized I couldn't. She said it was because of work. Company policy, she claimed. Too much sensitive client stuff. But even when we sat on the couch together, she'd angle the screen away, tilt the brightness low. Like whatever was on there wasn't meant for my eyes anymore. And the late meetings. God, the meetings. They started months ago, but I hadn't really questioned them until now. Emily worked remote, had since the pandemic started. At first it was flexible, some mornings, some afternoons, a few hours here and there. But lately, those meetings bled into the night. She'd close the door to the home office and emerge 2-3 hours later, looking exhausted. Sometimes smiling, sometimes distant. Once, I made dinner and left it on the table for her. She never came out. I knocked gently on the door and asked, "Hey, you almost done?" She snapped, louder than I'd ever heard her. I said I'm working. I backed off. Later, she apologized. Said she was stressed, that I caught her during a tense call. I accepted it. At the time, I wanted to believe that. But now, replaying it in my head, I remember how quickly she'd locked the screen when I entered, and how long it took her to come out after that. Yoga was another one. She never did yoga until this past year. Then, suddenly, every Thursday night like clockwork, she had a class across town. Always came home late. Sometimes her hair would be wet. Sometimes she'd be dressed like she hadn't even worked out. One night, she came back in a full face of makeup and earrings. I asked, "You wear that to class?" She laughed and said, "There was a smoothie bar afterward. We stopped there." But the next morning, I found a receipt in the trash, not from a smoothie bar, but from a place called Martel Lounge. Cocktails. 2 drinks. One of them a bourbon. Neat. Emily hates bourbon. I stared at the receipt for a long time before throwing it out. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know what I would do if I let myself go there. And it wasn't just the nights out. The apartment started feeling unfamiliar, like it wasn't entirely mine anymore. I'd come home, and there'd be faint cologne in the air, not mine. A glass in the sink with red lipstick around the rim, when Emily had sworn off makeup that week. Once, there was a pair of socks on the floor near the couch. Men's socks. Dark gray. Not my brand. "Are these yours?" I asked, holding them up. She looked over her shoulder from the sink. Oh yeah, probably. From laundry. But they weren't. I checked. I knew what I bought, what I wore. These were different. Finer. And not just newer, unfamiliar. Then there was the razor. It showed up in the bathroom about 2 months ago. A men's razor, left on the shower shelf like it belonged there. I hadn't noticed it at first. But one morning, as I was grabbing shampoo, I spotted it wedged next to her loofah. Did you get a new razor? I asked. She didn't even pause. Oh, that? I've been using it to shave my legs. It's better than the women's ones. Closer shave. I laughed at the time. Thought, maybe that made sense. But then I realized, why would she leave it in the shower, separate from her other stuff? Why wouldn't she just use mine, the one on the other side of the caddy? The more I thought about it, the more the pieces began falling into place. Or maybe not falling, slamming. Like a puzzle I'd been too blind to finish. Her sudden energy shift. Her smile that never reached her eyes. The way she'd get defensive if I asked too many questions. And worst of all, the way she looked at me. Like I was a fixture in the room. Like I was something she had to manage. I started keeping my distance. Not because I didn't care, because I didn't trust what I'd see if I looked too close. I didn't want to become paranoid. I didn't want to be that guy, the suspicious husband, snooping through drawers and accusing his wife of things he couldn't prove. But I also couldn't ignore what I already knew. So instead, I watched. I noticed how she'd pause her phone screen when I entered a room. How the laughter that once used to come easy now felt rehearsed. I noticed that her texts had become shorter, colder. No more love yous. No more winking emojis or little inside jokes. Just okay. Just on my way. Just silence. I noticed that she never touched me anymore. Never reached for my hand. Never leaned on me during movies. Our int asterisk Macy faded, not all at once, but in pieces. It was like we were roommates with a shared past, but no present. And the hardest part? She didn't even seem to notice. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. One night, about a week after the jacket incident, I came home to find the bedroom completely dark. I called out, "Emily?" No answer. I walked in, flipped the light, and found her curled up under the covers, facing away. "You okay?" I asked softly. She didn't move. "I'm tired," she mumbled. "Long day." I stood there for a moment, trying to figure out if I should press it. But I didn't. I turned the light back off and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, listening to the sound of her breathing. I wondered what secrets she was holding behind that silence. What names she wasn't saying. What stories she was telling herself to justify whatever she was doing. I think deep down, I already knew the truth. But I wasn't ready to hear it out loud. Not yet. I think part of me was still hoping I was wrong. That all of it, the jacket, the phone, the receipts, the razor, could be explained away. Maybe I'd built the whole thing in my head, connected dots that didn't belong to the same picture. Maybe I'd gotten paranoid. Or maybe I was just scared of what it would mean if I was right. That hope didn't last. It was a Friday night, one of those dull, gray evenings where the city feels like it's asleep. Emily had mentioned earlier in the week that she had a birthday dinner to attend. Just the girls, she said, one of her coworkers turning 30. I didn't question it. I just nodded and told her to have fun. She got ready slowly, taking her time. She wore a black slip dress I hadn't seen before, something elegant but a little more revealing than her usual look. Her hair was down in soft curls, makeup sharper than she normally did it. Lipstick darker, eyes bolder. She looked good. She looked incredible, honestly. But it wasn't for me. "You sure you don't want to come?" she asked me casually, glancing at herself in the mirror. "Nah," I said. "Girls' night, right?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Right." She left just after 7 p.m., spritzing perfume at the door. I watched her from the living room as she paused by the mirror, did one last check, and then left without a backward glance. No kiss. No love you. Just the sound of heels on the stairs, and then the door shutting. I stared at the closed door for a long time. And I waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, maybe nothing. But something told me not to move, not yet. I ended up scrolling through Instagram, half paying attention, not really expecting anything. That's when it happened. One of Emily's co-workers, Chelsea, I think, posted a story. Just a 5-second clip. A boomerang. The kind of thing you tap through without thinking. But I saw it. And I froze. It was a hotel room. Dim lighting. Bottles of wine on the nightstand. Soft music in the background. And in the center of it all, Emily. She was sitting on a man's lap, glass of wine in her hand, laughing, head tilted against his. His arm was wrapped around her waist like he belonged there. She looked comfortable, relaxed, familiar. I blinked. The story vanished. I sat there in stunned silence, heart pounding in my chest. Had I just seen that? Was it really her? I went back, tapped on the story again, but it was gone. Already expired or deleted. I opened Chelsea's profile. Nothing. No new posts, no other stories. I searched her tagged photos. Nothing. But it didn't matter. Because I'd been fast enough. I'd taken a *T. And there it was, on my phone. Frozen in time. Undeniable. Emily. In a hotel room. With a man. Not her brother. Not a coworker. Not some mistake. There was no caption, no names. But I didn't need one. I recognized the smile on her face. I recognized the way her hand rested on his knee. Her body language, so natural, so easy. This wasn't new. This wasn't one time. This had been going on. For how long, I didn't know. But in that moment, all the doubt that had been circling my chest evaporated. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I was being lied to. The strange part is, I didn't feel what I thought I would. No rage. No outburst. No surge of betrayal. Just silence. Just a strange, cold clarity. It was like my body knew before my mind did. This is the moment everything changes. I sat with the image on my screen for what felt like hours, staring at every detail. Her earrings. His watch. The wine label. The curtain in the background. All of it felt surreal. Like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. Someone else's wife. And yet, there she was. My Emily. Except she wasn't mine anymore. I thought about calling her. I thought about texting Chelsea. I even considered showing up at the hotel, standing in the lobby until she came down. But what would that do? I wasn't interested in some dramatic confrontation. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to be the husband screaming in the hallway while strangers watched and whispered. I wanted truth. And I had it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with the lights off, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the building made me think she was back. Every passing car outside felt like it was stopping at our door. But she didn't come home until after 2. I heard the key turn. The slow click of the lock. Her heels on the hardwood. She paused, probably surprised the living room lights were off. I didn't move. Didn't say a word. She tiptoed past me like she was sneaking in after curfew, careful not to wake a sleeping parent. I heard her go upstairs, the faint sound of water running, the rustle of clothes being changed. Then silence. I stayed on the couch, eyes wide open. In the morning, she acted normal. Too normal. Made coffee. Hummed under her breath. Played with the cat. When I walked into the kitchen, she smiled. "Hey," she said, like nothing was different. "Hey." She was wearing one of my hoodies. I used to love that. I used to think it meant something, that she felt safe in it. But now, it looked like a costume. A souvenir from a version of us that no longer existed. "Sleep okay?" she asked. Yeah, I lied. She poured me a cup of coffee. I took it. We stood there, 2 people playing pretend in a kitchen filled with lies. I didn't bring up the photo. I didn't ask her about the hotel. I didn't even mention Chelsea's story. Because I already knew the answer. And sometimes, when the truth is finally undeniable, there's no need to speak it aloud. It just sits there, between you, making itself known. After that night, I changed. Not all at once. Not in some movie montage kind of way. But quietly, subtly, like a tide pulling back from the shore. Inevitable, steady, silent. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask about the hotel room, or the man, or the wine. I didn't bring up Chelsea's story or the picture saved on my phone. I didn't even hint that I knew. Because I didn't need her to explain anymore. I didn't need to hear another carefully rehearsed lie or some half-hearted apology designed to hold me in place. Whatever we had, whatever we were clinging to, it had already been gutted by the truth. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. And in that space between knowing and speaking, I found something unexpected. Peace. Not comfort exactly. Not closure. Just stillness. I stopped chasing. Stopped asking where she was going, what time she'd be home, why she came back late. I stopped checking her location, stopped waiting up, stopped pretending to be surprised when her stories didn't add up. I let her speak, let her spin whatever version of reality made her feel better, and I nodded along like I believed her. She didn't notice the difference, not at first. She probably thought we were turning a corner, that I'd finally relaxed, that I trusted her again. Or maybe she was just relieved that I wasn't asking questions anymore. Whatever she thought, she was wrong. I was just done. done trying to force something that was already gone, done gripping at a version of us that had stopped existing long before the evidence showed up. And so I started to detach, not in a spiteful way, not to punish her, but because it was the only way I could breathe. I started waking up early, before sunrise, before her. I'd pull on my hoodie, lace up my shoes, and run. Just down to the lake and back. Lake Michigan in the morning is hauntingly quiet. Still water, empty trails, gulls circling above. The city hums differently when no one's awake yet. It's the only time that felt like mine. I'd run until my legs ached, until my chest hurt in a good way, clean pain. Honest pain. The kind I understood. Afterward, I'd sit on the rocks and just exist. No phone, no noise. Just me, the cold air, and the sound of the waves slapping stone. It was like pressing pause on everything, like stepping out of the mess for a few precious minutes. Then I'd go home, shower, eat breakfast alone. She'd usually still be asleep or upstairs with the door closed. We stopped having meals together, stopped watching shows, stopped touching, stopped talking about anything that mattered. We talked about laundry, groceries, the cat, things that didn't require eye contact. Sometimes I wondered if she noticed. Sometimes I wondered if she cared, but I never asked. Instead, I poured myself into things I used to love. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. At first it felt forced. The words were stiff. But then they started flowing, and I realized I had more to say to a blank page than I did to my own wife. I picked up a few freelance gigs on the side. Just small writing jobs, copy editing, ghostwriting, branding content for local businesses. It gave me something to focus on, something that made me feel like myself again. I called old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Guys I used to play pickup ball with, former coworkers, college roommates. Most of them were surprised to hear from me. One of them, Marcus, laughed and said, "Dude, I thought you died or something." Something like that, I told him. We met for lunch a week later. We talked for 2 hours straight. I started reading again. Books I'd bought, but never touched. Essays, memoirs, poetry, stuff that made me think, stuff that made me feel human. It was like finding pieces of myself I didn't even realize I'd lost. And every day, the silence between Emily and me grew larger. It stretched out across the living room, down the hall, up the staircase. It settled in the kitchen and curled up at the foot of our bed. It was everywhere. She still went through the motions. She still made smoothies in the morning, still FaceTimed friends, still laughed at something on her phone while curled up on the couch. But she never laughed with me. I became invisible. And for a while, I resented that. But then I realized something. She'd stopped seeing me a long time ago. I was just finally catching up. We lived like that for weeks. Not quite strangers. Not quite partners. Just two people sharing space, orbiting each other with forced civility. There were moments when I caught her looking at me, as if she was trying to figure out what had changed. But she never asked. Maybe she didn't want the answer. Maybe she already knew. One night, I came home from a walk, and she was sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, sipping something from a mug. She looked over at me and said, "You've been different lately." I paused in the doorway. "Yeah," I said. "I guess I have." She didn't say anything after that, just turned back to the skyline. I didn't join her. Instead, I went inside, grabbed my laptop, and started drafting a letter. Not to her, to myself. Just a reminder of where I was, what I knew, what I'd chosen. It wasn't rage driving me anymore. It was clarity. And once you see clearly, you can't go back to pretending. The next day, I cleaned out the guest room closet. Not for her. For me. I needed a place to breathe. A space that wasn't soaked in the weight of us. Somewhere I could think, exist, sleep without pretending. I started sleeping there full-time a few nights later. When she asked why, I just said I wasn't sleeping well. She didn't argue. She didn't follow me. She just nodded and went back to scrolling her phone. That's how it was now. No fights. No screams. Just quiet collapse. Like the slow cave-in of an old building. Dust rising in the air while the structure sinks from the inside out. Nobody notices until it's already rubble. It was a Thursday when she asked me to come. We hadn't gone anywhere together in months, hadn't attended a dinner or event as a couple since. Well, since before the silence. Before the jacket. Before everything cracked and split and quietly rotted beneath the surface. So when she turned to me while sipping her smoothie and said, "You should come to my work party," I actually blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. What? My firm closed a big deal. They're throwing a rooftop party downtown. Champagne, DJ, a bunch of fake small talk. You know, the usual, she said. Then, before I could respond, she added, it'd be nice if you were there. It'd be nice. The phrase landed with a hollow thud, like a birthday card with no note inside. Still, I nodded. Sure. She smiled, just a flicker of it, then went back to scrolling her phone. The truth was, I didn't agree to go for her. I agreed to go because I needed to see something through. I didn't know exactly what. Closure maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to be in a room full of people and watch her pretend. Watch how easily she slid into that role. The charming, social, unbothered version of herself. Maybe I wanted to see, with my own eyes, how far she'd gone. We took separate Ubers. She left first, hours early. Said she had to help set up. That line again. So neat, so practiced. I didn't question it. I just let her go. I arrived just after 8. The venue was one of those high-rise rooftop lounges you only ever see on Instagram. Slick concrete floors, string lights zigzagged overhead, polished glass railings that framed the skyline like a movie set. The music was low and smooth, the kind of ambient thump you could feel more than hear. Emily was across the rooftop near the bar, laughing. She was surrounded by people, a champagne flute in hand, her dress hugging her in a way I hadn't seen in months. She looked like someone who belonged, elegant, composed, magnetic. When she spotted me, her smile didn't falter, but something behind her eyes flickered. She gave me a small wave, like I was an acquaintance from another life. Then she turned back to the conversation. I moved to the edge of the rooftop, found an empty spot near the railing, and watched the city. Chicago looked frozen from up there, still, distant, indifferent. I nursed a drink and leaned into the silence between me and the skyline. No one talked to me. I didn't try to talk to anyone. I was just there, invisible, until she noticed me. Her, Laura. I remembered her from a few work dinners years back. Emily's coworker. She always seemed sharp, a little sarcastic, with this subtle kindness that snuck up on you. I hadn't seen her since before the pandemic, but somehow she looked exactly the same. She walked straight up to me like we weren't standing in the middle of a celebration I had no business being at. Trevor, she said, smiling. Didn't expect to see you here. I shrugged. Didn't expect to be here. She leaned against the railing beside me. Emily told me you two were doing okay. I glanced at her, unsure if it was a question or a statement. That what she said? Laura didn't reply. She sipped her drink. The silence between us stretched for a beat. Then she said, you ever get tired of pretending? I looked at her. She met my gaze and didn't flinch. Yeah, I said quietly. Every day. We didn't say anything after that. But a few minutes later, the music shifted, something softer, slower. The kind of track that turned a business party into something hazily in asterisk mate. And then Laura did something I didn't expect. She reached for my hand. Come on, she said. Let's remind them you're still here. I didn't know what that meant, but I let her lead me anyway. She pulled me toward the dance floor, if you could even call it that. Just an open stretch near the bar, framed by twinkling lights and slick marble walls. There weren't many people dancing. Most were huddled in conversations or buried in their phones. But we danced. Laura placed one hand lightly on my shoulder, and I settled mine at her waist. It wasn't romantic, not flirty. It was just real, simple, grounded. For a moment, I let myself forget where I was. I forgot about the jacket, the phone, the hotel. I forgot about the guest room and the long silences and the wine glasses that never matched. I was just a man, holding onto something human. Across the rooftop, I saw Emily watching us. She stood still, her glass held midair, smile gone. For the first time in months, I looked her directly in the eyes. And I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel ashamed. She was the one who looked down. Laura must have felt the shift, but she didn't stop dancing. Her voice was soft when she spoke. You deserve more than what she gave you. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had closed. But I heard her. I really heard her. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew it. When the song ended, we let go of each other gently, no fanfare. Just two people finding a quiet kind of understanding. Thanks for that, I said. Anytime, she replied, smiling. She turned and melted back into the crowd, and I stood there for a moment, alone again, but different now. I wasn't waiting anymore. Wasn't hoping. Wasn't asking for something she didn't have to give. I glanced back at Emily. She'd turned away, now laughing at something a coworker said. But the laugh was hollow. Her posture stiff. Her eyes kept darting back to where I'd been. She felt it. That shift. That she didn't have the power anymore. That whatever thread she'd been holding me by had finally snapped. Later that night, we left at different times. She texted me, said she'd stay back for just one more drink. I said, okay. And I meant it. I got in the elevator, rode it down alone. The city pulsed around me as I walked to the curb and ordered a ride. When I got home, the apartment felt quiet again, but this time, it wasn't suffocating. It was calm. I walked through the rooms, slowly. Let the silence settle around me. I poured myself a glass of water. Sat on the couch. The same couch where I once found her phone buzzing with names I didn't recognize. The same couch where I had waited for her to come home, heart thudding in dread. But that night, there was no waiting, no dread, just stillness. And in that stillness, I realized something. She had already left me a long time ago.